I'm Craig Patterson, and I'm here with my mom, Elizabeth Patterson, also known as Tommy. And I'm going to ask her a few questions about her life and things that have happened to her. The first question I have is, what year were you born, on what date? What day of the week was it?
I was born on June 11th, 1931, and I don't know what day of the week it was. I never asked.
Did your parents tell you anything about the day we were born?
I think not.
Where were you born?
Galesburg, Illinois.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have 2 brothers.
Okay. When were they born?
The elder was born November 19th, 1927, and the next one, the middle one of the 3 of us, was born October 26th, 1929. That's the year of the Great Crash.
Do you have any specific memories of each of them from when you were first growing up?
Not from when I was a little kid, particularly. They were bigger, older, and they pretty much were bored by me.
What do you mean by that?
I don't think they really wanted to play with me. I think they would prefer to play with each other and tease me.
How did they tease you?
Well, they made fun of the things that I said. Not so much the things I did with my toys, but they did kind of make fun of the things that I said.
Do you remember any examples?
No, I don't. I don't.
Do you know where your first name came from?
My first name is Elizabeth, spelled with an S, and that's after my mother's mother. That's my grandmother on my maternal side. And not only was I named after her, but my cousin, who was a couple of years older than I, but she was also named Elizabeth. And we didn't get confused because all of the Elizabeth nicknames had been assigned to somebody. Our grandmother was Aunt Lizzie to a huge relationship, and to all of us grandchildren, she was Grandma. My cousin Elizabeth was Betty, and there was another Elizabeth somewhere who was Betts. And then I never had one of the Elizabeth nicknames. My nickname is from elsewhere.
Well, speaking of that, the 3 of you had nicknames. What were those and where did they come from?
The eldest was Puzzums, the next was Kokomo, and I was Tom Tom, and those came out of the funny papers, I believe. It was the Barney Google strip. I cannot remember the author, but we have spent a long time trying to find a copy of one of the strips with those characters in them. Puzzums. Now I've managed to forget what Puzzums was. Kokomo was a baby. Tom Tom was a black maid. I wonder if Puzzums might have been a donkey. Possibly. But anyway, the 3 of them, we were told, were from a comic strip, and we were also told that my father wanted us to have nicknames that were cute names in and of themselves, as opposed to shortening of our given Christian names and nicknames that we didn't like, such as Tubby or Four Eyes, or something that was uncomplimentary, which children often get named. So we had our own nicknames that went with us wherever we went.
What's your first most vivid memory?
I think it's a present I got when I believe I was 4 years old. It was a doll baby buggy, and it was really fancy. much nicer than the general run of presents that we got. It was a really nice baby buggy, and I remember that very much.
Do you remember what kind of doll it was?
Oh, I could use whatever doll in it that I wanted. The doll didn't come
okay.
with it. I could use it for any of the baby dolls that I had.
So you had a collection?
Oh, several. Not as many as I have teddy bears now, but I had a bunch of dolls, yes.
What was the house like you grew up in? How many bedrooms and bathrooms did it have? What do you remember about it?
The one that I remember is from Western Springs, Illinois, and I believe we were in the neighborhood of maybe 1933 or 4 when we moved there. And I remember that house. The downstairs had a living room, dining room, kitchen, bathroom, and another room which turned into being a bedroom for the boys. The upstairs was a master room for my parents, and another room which I eventually got to be my room. And then there was I don't know whether it was a full bath or a 3/4 bath upstairs.
What was your bedroom like?
It had windows that looked out on the roof of a porch that my father added onto the house. And I had a clothes closet and an entrance to the bathroom, and then I had we called it a vanity dresser for girls. It had drawers for accessories and a triple mirror. And I was older. I wasn't 4 when I had that room. I slept there for a long time. I think maybe the boys slept there for a long time too, but then eventually that room became mine.
And this was in Western Springs?
In Western Springs, yes.
Why do you remember the Western Springs house and not the Crete house? I thought you grew up in the Crete house.
I was in the Crete house. You have to know why we got there to Crete. We lived in the Western Springs house until 1940, when the National Guard, to which our father belonged, as a summer soldier, I think they were called, and they were nationalized before the Second World War started. And then in the fall of 1941, I think, they were nationalized, and then we vacationed some in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where he was stationed for the summer of 41 and 42. And so in 1942, they were put into the regular service as opposed to the National Guard. The war hadn't started yet. Wait a minute, 1941. The war started in 41. He was sent to Washington State. Oh, now I've got the years a little mixed up in there, but anyway, had the war in... The war was declared in the winter of 1941, so it must... So it was in 1942 that they were sent to Washington State. They had been nationalized in 1941. In 1942, he was sent to Washington State, and he thought that would be a good opportunity for us to see a little of the country. So he made arrangements for us to go to Fort Lewis and live there while he was stationed there. And that was a marvelous trip. It was on a train. We had sleepers on the train. It was a lot of fun.
Fort Lewis in what state?
Washington.
Okay.
And but we were only there from about October to March. Is that about 6 months? And while we were gone, they rented the Western Springs house to somebody. Then in the springtime of 1942, sorry, it should be 1943 now, shouldn't it? In the spring of 43, he was sent overseas. And so we couldn't go with him because there was a war on, folks. And so we were going to come back to East, and we didn't have a place to go because the house in Western Springs had been rented. So in this See the USA, in your Chevrolet, adventure, we came around from Washington State down through California, through Arizona. We had a little stop at the Grand Canyon when it was snowing. So my trip to the Grand Canyon, I didn't see a thing except snow because it was snowing when we were there. And then we got back to Illinois and stayed, in theory, to stay with my grandmother. This is my grandmother Elizabeth, my mother's mother, until our Western Springs house should open up for us to live in, except it didn't. They didn't want to move. And I think there was some reason why we didn't want to force them out. Oh, meanwhile, the people who had been with my grandmother, helping her and taking care of her husband, my grandfather, had died a couple years before. Her sister had been living with her. Her sister died. So there was my grandmother. My mother thought, okay, we're here. We'll stay and take care of Grandma. And we ended up staying there so that my high school career was spent in Crete from 1943 to 1948 when I graduated from high school. And I don't know whether those years were more impressionable or why. I do kind of remember those as my growing up years as Crete. And you want to back up a little bit. A couple things I remember from when I was in Western Springs is that my father would take us around to look at the Christmas tree lights. That's one thing that he did with us, but I don't remember doing very much with him because any summertime vacation that he had, he was in the National Guard, so he always went to summer camp for the National Guard. Once we went with him to Delavan, Michigan. I think it was Delavan. I remember that trip because they didn't have inside bathrooms, they had outhouses, and they were covered with, what do you call those spiders that are, not thousand-legged bugs, but daddy long-legged spiders. The whole outhouse was covered with daddy long-legged spiders, and it scared me to go in there. And we did not vacation with my father and my mother as a family very often. That was one of the few times that we did.
Is that because you couldn't afford it, or because he was always gone in the service?
I think it was more because he was always gone to a military encampment. But there might have been some affording in there. We didn't take big trips.
Did your mother work as well?
No, she kept house. Although, when we were in Fort Lewis, one of the things that she did, we've laughed about this since because my mother was not a very good driver. She was of an era when the first time she had to have a driver's license test was when she was 65, because she learned to drive, when they were inventing cars, for heaven's sake. When we were in Fort Lewis, she joined the motor pool and she became a driver for the Army, where they drove trucks from point A to point B to get them from one place to another. None of us could figure out how she managed to get that job, but that was kind of good.
Do you remember the Western Springs neighborhood more growing up, or Crete, since it was in high school?
In high school, Crete, and I remember the Western Springs neighborhood, though, because I had two very good friends. One lived 2 doors from us, and one lived a block and a half from us. And so I remember those two places. And I wrote to those 2 girls After we moved in 1943. I communicated with them until last year when my second two-door-away neighbor died. So I don't write to her anymore. And the other one I'm still writing to.
You said that you wanted to add something to what you were just speaking of.
Well, you asked me about what I remembered from growing up times, and I do remember some things pleasantly from Western Springs, but I also remember Crete even when we weren't living there, because our mother, as the saying goes, was pretty much joined at the hip to her mother. So she spent a lot of time going over there, visiting. Crete was about 30 miles from Western Springs. Maybe no more than 40, but I think about 30 or 35. And she had the use of their Ford car and would drive over to visit them and take us along. So we spent a great many of our summer vacations over there with Grandma and Grandpa before he died, and a lot of time going over there to visit. And so I think of that as kind of a part of my growing up, is these relatives. And my mother had a sister who lived 10 miles from Crete. Their family was down in Crete a great deal, so their 3 girls, who were our first cousins, were part of our growing up. And I think of that whole entourage as being our family. My mother, father, my mother's sister and her husband, and their 3 children. My father did have a sister, but she was not part of our growing up. And my father's parents, we went to visit them. They lived in Chicago, and we went to visit them from Western Springs from time to time, but not with the same frequency that we went to Crete to visit my mother's mother. So all of those things are part of my growing up. But the thing about Crete is that it was a very small town. Western Springs was a suburb of Chicago, which has a different flavor from a farming community like Crete. Now, my grandfather was not a farmer, but Crete was a farming community, really, and the people were close. If they didn't live close, they behaved like close friends. Everybody knew everybody. The schools were kindergarten through 12th grade in one building. And so it was a totally different atmosphere from a suburb. And when we were in Crete, there was a parade for every occasion. Memorial Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Flag Day, Bastille Day, Labor Day, everything. And when the boys were in high school, they played in the band. Oh, I twirled a baton when I was in high school, and we all marched in the parades that were going on all the time. So it was a community thing. And ice cream socials, we went to the ice cream socials. We had a community recreation center for the high school kids so that we could all have a place to go and dance. And I think at that time we used records, I think. And that's how we spent our weekend nights. We did have a movie in Chicago Heights, but not one in Crete, so we didn't really have a whole lot of things to do. And also, keeping the time frame in mind, none of us had cars. We walked everywhere we went. It was a small town. We could walk everywhere we went. In Western Springs, we walked to our friends, and we walked to the grocery store, because that was only a couple blocks. But if we were going to do something in the way of activity, we might get on the train and go to Chicago. We didn't do that because we didn't have the money to do that. That was in the Depression era, and so we didn't do a lot of stuff like that. But one of the things that I remember about the Depression was that there was a bakery in one of the towns near Western Springs, and Thursday was the maids' night out for the rich people, and so they ordered the $1 dinner from the bakery, and you got a dinner for 4 for $1. Can you believe that? This was a long time ago. And my mother sometimes would splurge $1 to have the $1 dinner for the 4 of us, which was kind of fun. I'm wishing now that somebody had a $1 dinner for us.
Do you know where your parents met or how they met?
I don't know where they met specifically, but I think they met because my uncle worked for Standard Oil, and I think that my father probably had a job with Standard Oil for a little while. My father he went to West Point, and then when he got out of West Point, I think you're committed to 4 years of service or something like that. And then I think after that he must have gotten a job where he met my uncle, and then my uncle introduced him to my mother. I'm kind of vague on that, but I think that's sort of how it went.
Who was more strict, your mother or your father?
Well, I don't know, because my father was not around very much. He even when he was a civilian and working as a real estate appraiser, he was always going to night school or to what do the National Guard people do? They have nights when they have to go to drills or something like that. So he was not home a whole lot. Excuse me.
Did you get into any trouble as a teenager?
As a teenager?
Well,
I don't know.
Did you get into any trouble? Because I don't want to restrict it to just being a teenager, since you seem to think maybe I am.
Yeah, I remember once when I was about 7, when we lived in Western Springs, we had a new neighbor. My mother and I had had a discussion about what was rude and what was acceptable social questioning and behavior. And one of the things we covered was, that one never asks people how much money they made, what religion they were, all those other things that you're not supposed to ask people. And one of the things that she mentioned this, that you would never ask anybody to see their home. And we had this new neighbor. She was a little kid my age, and I wanted to get to meet her. And so I asked her if I could go and see her house. Oh, my mother was furious. It's the only time I can remember that she swore at me. And
did you get to see the house?
Yeah, I saw the house before my mother found out about it. And she was absolutely furious with me. And that's the only time that I remember she got really after me. My father spanked me once, but I don't remember why. And it didn't happen very often, and he did not injure me.
You think your parents had a good marriage?
They had a very solid marriage. Because my father he saw to it that he took care of us financially. My mother took care of us emotionally, and I'm not sure that they were emotionally suited to one another. But they did stay married and provided a very solid footing for us.
Did you have pets growing up?
Pets? Oh, my word. We had several dogs. I do not remember them, except one that he was a darling. I think his name was King. That every boy names his dog King, right? And it was maybe some kind of spaniel or a charming dog, and he eventually was either stolen or went away or something, so we didn't have him. But one of the years that we went to Tennessee, to Chattanooga, to be with my father. And that was a wonderful summer. Very, very interesting. The place where we stayed at an Episcopalian girls' home in the summertime when none of the students were there, just the nuns. And they had a dog. We stayed in the priest's cabin, I think. And they had this humongous St. Bernard. He was wonderful. He would come in the house and drink out of the toilet and all of that. And they also had 3 Scotties. And the nuns were darling. They said they'd like to have us take the Scotties for a walk, but they weren't sure if we could keep up with them. Well, of course, that was one of the things where we had to just drag the Scotties to get them to walk anywhere at all. They were impossible. But that summer, we were in town in Chattanooga. No, Sewanee. Sewanee is the town where we stayed. Chattanooga was where the base was, the Army base. So we were at home in Sewanee, and my brother saw this dog that had been hit by a car, and he went over to see if the dog was all right, and the dog was not all right, except it was not dead. It was just its feet had been run over, and its toenails, I think, were clipped, and it was really scared, and he was so tender-hearted of it. And so my mother said, well, we better take it home and see if we can take care of it and see if it'll be all right. So we took it home, and it stayed with us for the next 14 or 15 years, and I have never seen such an impossible pet. She bit me. She slept with each one of us in our beds, and I'm looking at a squirrel on the banister. When she slept with me, she bit my toes until I was about 15. Then she gave it up. I don't know what made her stop, and she bit anybody who came to visit us. She bit them. My grandmother had a gravedigger who worked at the cemetery for her, and the dog did not like him at all. And when I got married, my husband said, I can't imagine why anybody would tolerate having a dog like that for that length of time. And I don't know why we did either. Coke liked the dog, and we kept the dog, and my mother decided, well, we breed her and have puppies, so we did that. Had half a dozen puppies that we had to take care of. We enclosed them in we made a little fence around the bottom of the the ping pong table. We had a ping pong table on the porch in Western Springs. So we kept the dog and the puppies in there till we could get rid of all of them. But, and they were nice dogs. They were cute dogs, sort of. But not nearly as cute as the dogs that I've had since. They were smooth-haired fox terriers. And dispositions, terrible dispositions.
Did you get an allowance when you were a kid?
Not when I was little, at least not that I remember. When I was in high school, my mother and I decided that I should have an allowance and figure out what it was for and stick to it. So I did. I got a clothing allowance then, and I had to pay for all my own clothes out of my allowance, and I did. I didn't get very many clothes. I had some hand-me-downs from these cousins, and I remember when I was a senior in high school, I got a coat that was my very own. It was not a hand-me-down, and I think my mother helped me pay for it, and I loved it forever. It was just a really nice coat.
Did you have chores that you had to do as a child?
Yeah, I always had to help wash the windows. We did not have a dishwasher, and I think we did help dry the dishes from time to time, but I don't know that it was a regular chore. My mother cleaned once a week, usually on Friday morning or Saturday morning, she would clean the house, dust, mop, and vacuum. And so that's how I thought it was done. That's what I still do. And I have a housekeeper now, and I tell her that's what I want her to do, is dust, mop, and vacuum.
Is that what she does?
Uh-huh.
Did you have any heroes or role models when you were a child?
Well, I think, I don't know, it was Superman an age that he would have been a hero of ours. Probably we read Superman thing. One thing we did, this was in Western Springs. If we were very, very good, we would get to stay up late, stay up on a school night, on Monday night, and listen to the Lux Radio Theater. And I think that was from 7 to 8 at night. And that was late for us to go to bed for school the next day. I know the rules are different now, but we were supposed to go to bed because of school the next day. And then if we were sick, we stayed home and listened to all the horrible soap operas, which meant then when you got well and went back to school, you had to rush home from school so that you could tune in and find out the latest episode of the soap opera you had been listening to when you were sick. And that was very important to do that.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a movie star. I used to read something in the newspaper about movie stars, and I thought they looked so glamorous. I didn't ever say that I wanted to act or that I wanted to do anything in order to deserve being that. I just wanted to be a big star.
You had mentioned World War II earlier. How did World War II affect your family if your father had to go fight?
I had a cousin who was in the Army early on. So when all of the stuff was going on in the Pacific and the Japanese took over they took the Philippines, is that what they took over? Where MacArthur said, I'll be back, the Philippines. And they captured all of those people, and he was one of the people captured, and he was lost in the Japan death march early on. We didn't find out until later, and I'm not sure that anybody was ever notified. I think we may have just figured, okay, that's where he was. He's not back. He's not coming back. So I lost that one cousin. My father was part of the time in the Pacific Theater and part of the time in the European Theater. But he didn't write us much. That's another thing. He didn't write us much because he said he didn't want his mail censored. And I thought in my head, well, he could write something that wouldn't be censored. He could write, how are you? I like you. We went for a hike today or something. But he didn't do any of that. He just didn't write because he thought he was being censored and he didn't want anybody doing that. So that was not too swell. We would have liked to hear from him more. But anyway, my mother was really busy with folding bandages, which the Red Cross did for the war effort. We all had some rationing, which did not... we didn't starve because of it. We just had to be a little more cautious about what we were doing. Shoes were rationed, how many shoes we could get. Meat was rationed. Sugar. Butter. And a couple other foodstuffs, but not terribly much more. And gasoline. And rubber, so you couldn't get new tires for your car. But of course, very few people had cars anyway. That was not a big thing in the 40s. It became a big thing after the war. And how did it affect us? My one of the fellows on the high school basketball team had a father who owned a gas station. And so he helped all of us pool our gasoline so that we could drive the kids to the basketball game to play. And later on we realized that it's barely possible that he was fudging a little bit. But we never knew. We never knew whether it was legit or not to do that.
Other than World War II, what big world events do you remember from when you were growing up?
Other than that, when FDR died, I remember that. I can't specifically tell you what I was doing, but I do remember that it happened. And
so you don't recall whether the whole family heard about it at once?
Within a couple of hours, but we weren't all sitting around the radio waiting to hear. We probably all heard about it the same day. Let's see, that'd be the first 50. I can't remember the exact dates of this, but we were conscious of the atomic testing. After the atomic bomb, that I definitely remember that ended the Japanese part of the war. But then there were further tests after the war was over. There were tests conducted in the Pacific with atomic bombs, and later I think there were some tests conducted with hydrogen bombs. I'm not sure about that, but I think there were. I remember that. And then I graduated from high school in 1948, so the war was over. And I began to think about other things, I suppose. So, and I'm thinking about the war years. No, I think we were just happy when the war was over. And the girls were happy. I remember that some of the girls were happy because then they could get more material and make these new length skirts. Skirts got longer after the war because we were allowed to have more material in our clothes. And that's really not too significant.
When you were a teenager, were there words or phrases that were popular that people wouldn't know about today?
I'm sure there were, but I don't remember what they were.
What did you like to wear as a teenager?
To school, I wore skirts and sweaters, saddle shoes, and bobby socks, mostly. That's as a high schooler. But another thing was that we all had gym, which you might call PE or something akin to that. And that was one of the requirements, along with English and math and all the other things. PE was another one of the requirements. And so we all did that. And now, see, the rest of what did we wear when we were not in school? I think we wore jeans and T-shirts and pretty casual things.
Were those all because that was what your mom wanted you to wear, or did she not approve of the things you wore?
No, she approved. Except if the sweaters were too tight, she didn't approve of that. So I didn't wear tight sweaters. But the thing about it is, nobody did. The girls pretty much, if they were flirting, they were kind of circumspect about it. And I'm sure that we were all flirting, because that's what we do. That's what people do, is flirt. I was a big flirt.
When did you learn how to drive?
Oh, when I was... I must have been 15 because I was 16 in the summertime in June, and I would have. We didn't have driver ed. You just had somebody from school, really, or not even necessarily from school, but somebody teach you how to drive. And then we did all have to take tests to get our licenses. Who gave us a test? Must have been somebody from the state.
Who taught you how to drive?
Must have been my mother, because my father wasn't there to teach me. Do you think
wasn't anybody from school?
I don't think so. I don't remember for sure, but it wasn't. I'm pretty sure it wasn't a class. Did my mother teach me how to drive? I think I drive better than my mother did.
What was your first car, and how did you get it?
My own or in our family?
Your own.
It was a Chevy, whatever the dirt cheap model is, and it was probably a 1952, and I got it because I was going to get a job that I needed to travel. So I really kind of had to have a car. And a friend of mine had gotten married and was getting a divorce and getting the car, and she wanted to sell it. So I bought it from her. Oh, that must have been a 50, because it was not new, it was used. And I graduated from college in 1952 and went to work in 54. So it might have been a 50. It was not new. It might have been a 52 or 53 Chevy.
How long did you keep that
car? Several years, and I had it then when Dad and I got married, and he had a Hudson, which he absolutely loved, this Hudson. And I thought it was huge, and I didn't like it. But he thought it was kind of a Zephyr. He loved it. And then we decided it needed some work, and he didn't especially like my car because it was so ordinary, very ordinary. Everybody has these simple Chevrolets. Don't want that. So we traded both of them in on a newer Chevrolet. No, we just traded in one of them and kept the Hudson for another year, and then eventually traded that in for another Chevrolet. And we had a lot of Chevrolets until we got married, which was in 1954.
We'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
But going back to high school.
Yeah.
What dreams and goals did you have for your life when you graduated high school?
One of my goals was I wanted to go to college and finish college before I got married. I thought lots of girls went to college to meet men and marry them, and I didn't want to do that. If I was going to bother to go to college, I wanted to get something in there, so I said I wanted to meet a lot of men, that would be fine, but I wasn't interested in getting serious with any of them. And so I didn't. And I thought I was going to be this hotshot counselor. I majored in psychology, and I thought I'd be a counselor of some kind.
Mixing in the current with the early, just for a second, keeping in touch with the extended family has always been a priority for you.
Yes.
Did that attitude start when you were younger? And do you know how it started?
It started... Yes, when I was younger. I can't even name it, and my mother never said anything like we must do this or we mustn't do that. We just did it, and it started because in Crete, that's where Grandma lived, and that's where the foundation of the whole relationship was. And because she had so many brothers and sisters, and they all had offspring, many of whom were close physically. They were in Gary, Indiana, and Brunswick, Indiana, and Chicago Heights, Illinois, and all around, so that it was not hard to keep in touch with them. And there was always a gathering on any kind of holiday, and then and also for weddings and funerals and other swell affairs. And one of the famous phrases was, at funerals you'd get together and say, "Oh, Aunt Francine, it's wonderful to see you. I'm sorry it has to be for an occasion of this kind," meaning a funeral. And everybody always said that, but everybody enjoyed it. We all had a good time at all these gatherings because we'd see people we knew and people who liked us. And there was rarely, sometimes I'm sure there was, but there was rarely a feeling of, oh, we have to go to this because we know these people, or they sold us our house and so we have to see them or something. It was always, no, this is family. We want to see them. We want to go and see them. And it was always very positive.
All right, there are a few things that we haven't covered before we go into the next section. The first one is a present that your mother gave you. Tell me about that, the things that she explained to you about it.
I had asked for something that we used to call men. They were little, probably 3-inch high, metal soldiers or figures of some kind, and we played with them, and we called all of them men. And I had wanted to get some soldiers, I think, and I got something that I didn't want, and I went in the bathroom and sat there and cried and felt so sorry for myself because I didn't get what I had asked for. And my mother had a lovely talk with me. She explained that she was sorry that they couldn't find the particular men that I had wanted, but that she hoped that I would understand that they had tried, and that she hoped that I would be content with what I had gotten. And it made me think about it a long time, so that I remember that talk, and it makes me more grateful for things that I have as opposed to things that I think I want, which I don't always want, certainly don't always need, but I think that she explained it in a way that made me think about being grateful.
When you were 6, your family got a refrigerator. Tell us about that.
We had a literal ice box, and you put a sign in the window that said 25. You wanted 25 pounds of ice. And so the iceman came, stuck 25 pounds of ice in your ice box, and it literally kept the ice cold so that your stuff would not spoil. And they bought a refrigerator. It was a Frigidaire refrigerator. And it came this marvelous, huge box. Coke thought the box was far superior to the refrigerator, and he wanted to play in the box all the time. And I thought the refrigerator was pretty nice. And I still do think refrigerators are pretty nice.
And did that lead into somehow a lemon cake treat at the drugstore?
Yes. If my father was gone and my mother thought it was time to do something fun with us, she would gather us together and we would walk to the drugstore, which was literally a corner drugstore, and it was about 2 blocks from our house. And I'm sure it would be hard for anybody now to understand that buying something for 25 cents was a big treat, but it was. And it was a bottle of lemon Coke, and then we would take that home and she'd put it on ice and we'd all have it, and it was just really special for us. And we all remember that, or at least I certainly do. It was something very caring that my mother did for us.
Your grandfather, Grandpa Rohe, when he passed away, tell us about that.
Oh, my father and brothers and I were all in Western Springs. My mother was in Crete with her father and mother when my grandfather was sick. And when he died, she called on the telephone And I'm not sure why I answered the phone rather than my father, but I did. And she told me that he had died, and I got the news, but the thing I remember specifically about it is that for some reason I thought it should be incredibly private. And so I went in the bathroom and talked to her about my grandfather. I told the others that Grandpa had died, but it wasn't something that I wanted to go out in the dining room, which was our public area, or more public. I was in the bathroom being very private about it, and I'm not sure why.
What did your father teach you about trains in 1932?
Oh, the Burlington Railroad started the Denver Zephyr, the silver trains that were so special. And so my father took us to the railroad station in Western Springs one day and said he wanted to show us the trains. And so we stood there and waited for the trains. And he said, now, one thing I want to tell you about trains is you think if you stand here, you're okay because you're not on the track. But the trains make so much suction going by that they could sweep you up in them and run over you, and I don't want you to do that. So stay farther away from the trains than you think you need to. And so that has given me the feeling that you have to be pretty careful around trains, and I always am. And when I have nightmares, I dream about trains chasing me everywhere. He also told us that some people put a penny on the track to see if the train would crush it. He said that's illegal to do, so don't do that. It's dangerous to do for you, and it could be dangerous for the train. We were never quite sure whether it would ever derail a train or not. But anyway, so we didn't ever do that because he gave us the word that that was not something we were supposed to do.
Well, you didn't do that when you were kids, but we did that with you in Crete when we were kids.
You did?
Yes.
Didn't I tell you not to do that?
I don't recall.
I think I probably did. But, see, my father had, at one time during the Depression, had worked for the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe as a rail inspector. And so he had one of those little hand cars that go like this up and down, and he'd go up and down inspecting the train. I don't know how long that lasted, but that was during the Depression. My father always had work during the Depression. Didn't make much money, but he did always manage to get a job, which is pretty unusual because there were so many people out of work. But he did manage. And he must not have been connected with the oil business at that time because Uncle Melly always had it. He was with Standard Oil forever. And so my father didn't stay with that.
Your family took a trip to Washington, isn't that right?
Well, yeah, we went, and when we went to go to join him at Camp Fort, not Camp Fort, Fort Lewis, Washington. Yeah, we took that train trip. But there was another one later. Puz and Coke both went to school at Washington State College in Spokane, Washington. And one summer, I think maybe I had finished my junior year. I'm not sure that I've got this timing right, but anyway, I might have still been in high school, and my mother decided that we would go and pick them up from school when the term was over at Washington State and bring them back to Crete because they were going to come back to Crete and they didn't have a car there. So we were going to drive out there, and I was going to go with her so she'd have company. I must not have been driving. She asked, whatever that is, what's the association, the AAA or something, for a map to get to Spokane. So we got a road map, we got all the instructions, and we started out. We got along pretty well until we got to Washington State, where they had floods all over everywhere. And we went up these roads that were flooded, had been flooded out. It was terrible. We both were scared to death half the time. She was driving, and I'm almost surprised that we made it because we did not have an accident. It was one of the scariest trips I've ever been on. I don't want to do that again, ever. It was awful. All the roads were washed out. We didn't know where we were supposed to go. There wasn't any really good direction thing to tell you where you were supposed to go. But anyway, we did make it. We got there and picked them up, and then we all drove back to Crete.
What year did you go to the World's Fair?
Oh, see, I was very little. I was born in 1931, right? I think the World's Fair was in 1933 and 34. So when I was 3, I could remember when I was 3 in 1934. That's possible that I remember this. We went to the World's Fair in Chicago, and we rode on something called the Sky Ride, which, of course, now they've got stuff that's scarier and crazier and everything than that was. But this was a big thing, like a train car that was up in the air, and it must have moved somehow. I can't remember exactly how. But I do remember doing that and being kind of scared about going up into this tall thing and being off the ground and not really knowing what was going to happen. And I was pretty little. I think I was 3. And so I think that probably is my earliest memory.
Well, skipping ahead from 3 to college, what college did you attend? And do you think that was a wise choice to attend the college that you did?
I went to Rockford College, and I don't know whether it was, I will never know whether it was wise choice or not. I remember it fondly. Now they have turned into a university. They are very big on changing to meet the current demands. And so it's entirely different from when I was there. I loved it while I was there, and I feel that it provided me with the best friendships I have had with women. And we didn't meet men because it was a women's college. And it gave us the feeling that we could do whatever we wanted to do because there we were. We were getting an education. We were going to be strong people, and we were. And it was a very fine bunch of women with whom I became acquainted, and they've been my best friends for 60 years. And I don't know whether that was a good choice or not. I think I was slightly hampered by the fact that my aunt went there, my mother went there, my cousin went there. My cousin was a really big cheese there, and she was a couple of years ahead of me. So by the time I got there, oh yes, everybody knew her and whatnot. After she graduated and left, I got along more on me than on her, and that was a good thing. And I don't know whether I would have done better career-wise by going somewhere else, but I'm not sorry that I went there. I'm very happy about it. And I'm very grateful to my father for making it possible for me to go there.
Did you have a job in college?
Yeah, I worked in the dining room, waiting tables.
What did you like or not like about it?
About waiting tables?
Yeah.
The thing that I liked was seeing the other kids, because they don't do this anymore. We had a dining room, and the women all ate in the dining room, ate the dinner at the same time in the dining room. We sang our grace, and it was a time for a little bit of reflection and a lot of communication, because there were tables of, I don't know, probably 8, so that we would talk to one another. And so it was a good community time. The thing I didn't like about it was that the dishes that we had to carry out, we had little carts that we pushed things around on, but we had to get from the shelves to the cart. The dishes were this big. They were 8 in a stack. They weighed a ton. And they were very hard to move back and forth. I hated that part of it. And then the doors weren't terribly heavy, except in order to get them open, you had to kick them. And if you kicked them the wrong amount, then they would bounce back and hit you in the face or in the rear or something. I didn't think it was a terribly smooth arrangement for getting in and out of the kitchen, but mostly it was okay. And the people who worked in the wait staff, some of them I was more friendly to because we were all working. There were a few people who didn't work at all because they didn't have to work. And I don't know that I had to work, but I felt that I should. And so I used my waitressing money for my spending money.
After college, how did you and Dad meet?
I was in graduate school at Kansas State College, and this is one of the more embarrassing parts of my career. There were a couple of other women in the graduate school, and one of them asked us to a party at her house. She was married, and her husband was at this party, of course, because she was giving it. And apparently, one can only hope that he took a fancy to me. I didn't pursue him, but he did begin to pursue me. So that's how we met. What was the next part of the question?
Well, that was the only question
up
until that point.
Okay, well, that's how we met.
How did your relationship blossom after meeting?
Well, he told me that he was very interested in me, and I thought that was very nice, and I felt that he was definitely 73 layers better than anybody I had ever met before, at least that much. And if we were going to be interested in each other, I didn't think that was a good plan because he was married and his wife was in my department, and she and I were very good friends. And so I quit my job there and went back to Crete and told him that I thought that I should just get out of there until he and his wife had figured out what they wanted to do. And so I did. I went back to Crete, and then he and his wife eventually got a divorce, and then he came to Illinois and continued pursuing me. Well, he had continued pursuing me a little before he actually came back to Illinois.
What made you and Dad decide to come to the middle of Colorado?
Oh, Dad was born in Colorado. He thought, and when we got married, he got a job in Illinois because that's where I was, and we got married, and so we were in Illinois. And he did get a job at a school in Evanston, Illinois, which is one of the niftier spots in Illinois, on the North Shore of Chicago. So as jobs go, because he was teaching English, as jobs go, that was really pretty good. So that was not why he left there. He said he was tired of being in Illinois. He didn't want any children that we might have to grow up in Chicago. And then we had both Mark and Craig. And he said he wanted to come back to Colorado because this is what he considered his home base. And that's any place somebody is from tends to be their home base. Now, one would think, well, then why didn't I go back to Illinois? Because Colorado's better. It's nicer. But anyway, so we came to Colorado, and as soon as I got here, I could see why he wanted to be here. The atmosphere was very welcoming. And at the time that we came, which was 51 years ago, it was open and very relaxed and very friendly. Now it is fast-paced. People are pursuing stuff that they didn't used to pursue so much. It's just because everything has changed in the last 50 years. So, but I don't feel like moving because I get to look out my window at my spiritual support. The mountains are my spiritual support.
Well, what was special? Why did you come to Evergreen instead of going back to his home?
Oh, well, he was born in Trinidad, and he didn't think he wanted to go to Trinidad because that was really off the beaten track. Although that might not be such a bad place now. It'd be more laid back. But he mostly wanted to be in the mountains. And Greeley is where he went to school, but he didn't want to go back to Greeley. So he applied to about a dozen different places around Colorado, and he got responses from about 8 of them, I guess. And one of them from Colorado Springs called him up on the phone and said that they wanted him. He could have the job there if he wanted to come. And they knew that he really wanted to come to Evergreen because he had come out here and looked at all these places, Crested Butte and Evergreen and Colorado Springs and I don't even know where else, everywhere. And he had decided that Evergreen was a small town and that was where he wanted to be. And so the guy in Colorado Springs said, now I know you really want to be in Evergreen, so if you say you'll take this job, I kind of hope that you won't come up later on and say, oh, no, you really want to go to Evergreen. He said, no, he would go to Colorado Springs. So he hung up the phone and Evergreen called. Jefferson County called. And so he called Colorado Springs right back and said, hey, guess what? They just called. He said, and the guy was in Colorado Springs was very nice. And he said, well, no, you didn't wait 6 months to do that. You did it right away. And so then he signed on for here. But Jefferson County is a huge district, and he said he would come here if he could go to Evergreen. He did not want to go into Denver or Jefferson County, the big city schools in Jefferson County. He wanted to be in the mountain schools. And so they promised him a place in Evergreen. And back then, it was so remote that we used to laugh and say we got hazard pay. We got an extra $100 a month because our power bills were more expensive than the ones in town. After a couple of years, they quit that.
A little bit ago, you were talking about the house and how it was your spiritual center. How has Evergreen and the house played into that, into your spirituality in your current life?
I get to look out the window of our house and see the mountains, and I get to reflect on the whole business of the creation of the earth. That is one part of it. And then I get to look at the sky and think about the things that have been before and that may come after. And I get to look at that, and sometimes I see contrails which give me the feeling that I'm part of the whole thing. And it's something I don't happen to have ever gotten anywhere else. But I get it here.
Why did Dad decide to design his own house?
Well, partly because we knew how expensive having somebody else design and build it would be. That was one thing. But then another thing was that I think that he wanted to have it a certain way, and the only way he'd get it the way he wanted it was to do it himself.
How long did it take to build, and where did we live while it was being built?
It took from January to October to build because that includes digging the well and doing the road and all of that. And we finally decided that we had to move to get in here, and so we moved before it was completely done. And we lived, while it was being built, when we first got here, we lived in what we call the ice cream shop. When we moved there, it wasn't an ice cream shop, but it had been an ice cream shop on the highway down the road from where our current house is. And the reason we moved there is that the guy from whom we bought the land where we built the house owned 4 little cottages down the road and would rent us one of them because we had bought the land from him.
Is there something that people don't know about how you might have helped with the EHS students?
Oh, yeah, I think so, probably.
What would that be?
I helped grading papers with the EHS students because Dad was playing, and he really was not terribly in love with grading papers. Talking to the kids and talking about the subject engaged him, but the grading of the papers. So between those two things, I don't think he particularly liked it, but also it was a time thing because he was playing in Denver frequently 4 or 5 nights a week. It was hard for him to get his papers graded. So I helped with that.
And no one ever found out?
Not early on, no. A lot of people know now because it's been so long, I figure it doesn't hurt now. I don't think anybody's going to get after us now.
Certainly all the memories of when your kids were growing up must be fantastic. But do you have a favorite memory of when they were growing up?
I don't know if I have a favorite one. I do. I do remember one when Craig was probably about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old. I took him to a Halloween party where everybody was in costume, and it was time to go home, and so I went over and picked him up and said it's time to go, and he started beating on me, on my shoulder. He didn't hurt me, but he kept like this, and kind of wailing, and I looked at him and he said, and I said, I have the wrong tiger. I had another person in a tiger suit, which was just like the tiger suit I had made him. So I looked for his mother. We exchanged tigers, and I got him home. And I guess I was kind of touched. I was glad that he was that smart that he knew I wasn't his mother, this other kid. But I was kind of touched then that Craig wanted to come home with me instead of going with this other person. And with Mark, when he was, I kept a baby book with Mark with all the first this and first that, and I probably didn't do as good a job with Craig. But Craig taught, well, I'll get to that in a minute. So one of the things in the baby book is first this, first that, first word. And then the first sentence of more than 5 words. And so Mark's first sentence of more than 5 words was, after we had bought the white Corvette, Mark said, I want to go for a ride in the white car. And I thought, that's more than 7 words, so I wrote that down in the book. I thought that was kind of cool. But Craig, I don't know, I guess you were so busy accomplishing these things that I didn't write it all down. But one time you said you wanted me to read you a story, so I said, okay. And he said, I'll read it to you. So I gave you the book. And you read was it the Mole Family's Christmas? Do you remember what book I'm talking about?
No.
You sat down, you read that. You were 4 years old. You read this book to me, and I kept looking at it, and I said, did you memorize that? No. I said, well, what are you, I'm reading it to you. And you read me the whole book, and I think maybe Dad was there too. And we never figured out how you learned to read that, because we did not teach you to read. I didn't teach Mark to read either, but he says he read before he went to school. I don't know whether he did or not. He says he did, but you definitely did. We did not teach you, and that is why when you were in first grade. No, when you were in kindergarten, yeah, you were fine. In first grade, your teacher let you do all kinds of things because you were smarter than the average bear. And then in the second grade, the teacher recognized right away that second grade was definitely under your head, and she is the one who endorsed that we send you for 1 day a week at home to do things at home. Well, so in theory, I was homeschooling you 1 day a week. I don't know what I taught you. The part that I remember is that we took field trips occasionally. I let you build models like a maniac, both dinosaur models and car models. And I think I let you draw some, but I loved giving you spelling tests. And I'd give you these spelling tests of words like prestidigitator, and then turn that paper into the second grade teacher, and she would be duly impressed because you spelled all these words that were probably not part of the regular second grade vocabulary. And I asked you once, how did you learn how to read? And you said you didn't know.
Well, when we were growing up, I know that you went to a lot of community meetings, county meetings, city planning meetings, because I went to a number of them with you. What made you decide to become so involved with those?
Well, that's, for one thing, that's a good way to meet other people who live here, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to be part of the community, and I wanted to know the other people who were also part of the community. And then the women rarely worked outside the home, so they had time because they were taking care of their kids. They had days that they could either get a sitter or trade sitting with somebody and go to some of these meetings. And you were so... Everybody just marveled at you because I would let you down there. Do you remember going to those meetings?
Yes.
We'd take you down there, give you a book, stick you under a table, and you would sit there and read the whole time. All these commissioners and everybody were talking about stuff. You never made a scene. You were always just so nifty about the whole thing that it got to be as much fun as anything else to take you along and watch you amuse yourself with a book or something.
Didn't Dad once ask you why you went to all the planning meetings?
Did he? I don't remember that he
Maybe
did.
This is something I remember that you don't. He said, why do you go to all these meetings when nothing happens?
Oh, and I said, but because nothing may happen, but something may happen if we don't go. Did I say that?
No.
Oh.
You said, that's why I go.
Because nothing ever
happened.
happened?
Make sure nothing happens.
Oh, okay. That's a good reason.
How did you meet Joanne Greenberg?
Dad had a student right about the time that I was starting to work outside. And this student had a mother who worked for Joanne, and she needed to quit working for Joanne and get a full-time job so she could make some money. So the girl knew that I was starting to freelance secretating and wondered if I'd be interested, so I was, and I went over to talk to Joanne, and she didn't interview me or anything. She just said, well, come next Monday at 2 or something. So we just started that way. But I started doing that, working out when I was, when Mark graduated from high school, I signed up for a temporary agency. And I got on to some places there, and I also signed on to be a temporary at the school. And so I got some work that way, being a substitute secretary at the school. And of course, with doing that, I got fired every year and rehired every fall. That was kind of tedious. But then eventually the school was trying to save money, so they quit having substitute secretaries, and so that kind of fizzled out. And then I had a job working for 2 real estate agents, but no, not agents, appraisers. And then they got a divorce, and so I went with one of them, and then she died and whatnot. And I just stayed with Joanne. I got it really from one of Dad's students.
Were you working with her when she wrote I Never Promised You a Rose Garden?
No, that was her second book. And I probably didn't start working until about her 4th or 5th book. I don't remember which. I'd have to look.
You've been working with her for quite some time.
35 years.
So you must like it.
Well, it's very challenging. It's also quite a bit of fun because she is approximately my age. She's a little younger. Never lets me forget it. But we have the same kind of general background as far as the timing and the country. She was born in Brooklyn, New York, and she definitely is from an Eastern thing. So being here is totally foreign, was totally foreign, but she trained herself out of having a Brooklyn accent. So she doesn't sound Brooklyn now. But she wanted to be independent and away from her parents.
Do you have a favorite story or something that you'd like to say about Mark?
It seems to me that Mark did spend a lot of time trying to please Dick and me. And one time when he was valedictorian of his high school class, and I think I had the feeling, I don't know whether he ever verbalized this or not, but I had the feeling that he felt he had to do that for Dick and me, which is kind of too bad. It would have been nice if he felt like doing it, but maybe it was okay with him, except it turned out to be a moderately humorous late told story, because there was a thunderstorm when he graduated from high school, and he had to go, they had to move the whole thing inside so that everybody didn't get electrocuted. And so I never heard his speech. I don't know what it was about. And I asked him once to give me a copy of it if he had it, and he said, well, it got all wet during the storm. So I don't have any idea what he said, but he went on to do things with his trombone that were very positive. But when he graduated from DU, he did something very interesting. He had said he thought he wanted to go on in music, but then he went to Kansas State, not Kansas, Colorado State College in is it Fort Collins or
Colorado State University?
Colorado State University, and he studied, I think, not biology, botany. And now, of course, we have a trunk full of plants that I'm not supposed to throw away, which is very humorous. I don't know whether they're ever going to grow in that trunk or not. But after that, he came back to the house and said he had decided that he missed the playing so much that he wanted to go on. And then he went a couple different places to see where he wanted to move in order to pursue his music. And he decided, and I think that really took more courage than I would have had at his age to decide to move. So he moved to New York, and the day that he packed up the car and left, all I could say to Dick was, well, at least we're both crying about the same thing already. But he did the things that needed to be done in order to pursue his career, which I admire a great deal. Oh, I skipped the part about his being. He did a project when he was at DU, and so that he graduated summa cum laude, which I think that's pretty special. And I don't know whether he did that because he really wanted to or because he thought he was supposed to. I'm not sure. But anyway, I was very proud of him. I don't know whether that's right. Should I be proud to be his mother? I guess that's what it is. I'm proud to be his mother. And so he has managed in New York since 1981, 82, 83, from about 1984 till now. Is that 30 years?
Yes.
He's been there 30 years, and I think that everybody I know feels that he's made it. Because he's working. Sometimes he doesn't work, but he always gets another job. When something closes, when a show closes, or when a job folds, somebody calls him and he gets another one. And I guess something that struck us was at the Colorado Symphony Guild, we had one of the trombone players from the Colorado Symphony came and did our program one day. And so I walked up to him and I was going to ask him something about, I said, I'm sorry to bother you, but I just wondered. And he said, oh, you wonder, because I was wearing my name tag that said Tommy Patterson. And so he said, you wonder if I know Mark Patterson. He said, I've never met him, but I know of him. And everybody around me said, well, I guess that kind of is the frosting on the cake. And so it's great to think that he's doing something that he really did want to do, and he stayed with it. And in an awful lot of ways, it's amazing to me that it worked out as well as it did. I hope it can stay that way for a while.
How did you decide to name your kids? Is there any interesting story there?
No, I know my mother wondered why we picked the names that we did, because they are not family names, and so that's unusual in this relationship to which we belong. This Beckman thing is a huge thing, but we picked names that we liked. We liked the sound of them. I later learned that 1960 was a big year for Mark. And he has a cousin named Mark Allen. I think I spelled Allen funny because I wanted it to be different from everybody else, but lots of other people have it spelled however we spelled it. And so when we named you, I picked more names just because I liked them. But I don't think that 1963 was a big year for Craig. I've only met Vanessa's husband is named Craig. Is he your age?
No, he's younger.
Is he really? Oh. Okay.
So working for Joanne has occurred longer than any other job.
Yes.
What do you like most about working for her?
Probably the discussions that we have and the things that she asks me about, either that I have to look up. She does a great deal of her own research. I don't do all of that. Sometimes I find things for her. Sometimes I find out things for her, but I don't do actual research for her books. But talking to her is having a very positive conversation with somebody about the way the world has changed, how we view it, all of those things that are fun to talk to people about. And now, of course, we both have the same general occupation, which is going to the doctor. That's what we both do all the time.
Well, getting back to the family, what's the most memorable family vacation? Is there one specific one?
I remember, you mean you're talking about our family, not,
yes.
Yeah, I do remember the 2 family reunions we have been to. Those were lovely vacations. But I also remember, those were when we had the whole schmear one in Colorado and one in Oregon. Is that where it was? But I also remember the vacations that we had with the 4 of us. One of them was I think we were actually going to Las Vegas, but the thing that I remember about that trip in particular is going to Death Valley. I don't know why. It was interesting. We liked it, and we had a good time doing it, and made a few funny jokes and stuff. So I remember that, and I do remember the ones in New Mexico. Those were mostly fun.
Even though we were camping.
Yeah.
Is there one holiday memory that stands out? Or one way that we celebrated the holidays?
The only holiday memory that stands out is the one when Colorado was 100 years old, because other people came to celebrate at the same time. So we got to see some other people from the family, and I don't know what you were doing. Mark was playing at some kind of celebration in town, in wherever they were having it, where they had some people playing. And do you remember what you were doing in 1976? That was Centennial.
No, I remember. No, I don't remember.
And that was pretty fun. I don't mean the whole other family was here, because they weren't all here, but some of them were, and so that was kind of fun. And it was fun to have Mark be playing there.
What was the hardest part about raising your kids?
Never knowing whether I was doing it right or not. Always wondering, should I have done it some other way? Although, to tell you the truth, I didn't wonder that all the time.
No, I assure you, you did it right. What do you find to be the best thing about being a parent or a grandparent?
The best thing about being a parent is to see the truly fine young people that I could say, oh, Dick, you and I did that. That is amazing to me that we managed that. And I'm sad that he can't see that. But I know it. And the grandparent part, I haven't done anything as being a grandparent. She's a good kid. A couple times when she was here, she planted flowers in my pots. I loved her for doing that. She was so sweet doing that. And she's very sweet to me, but I don't see her often enough to really know her. And I certainly wish her well.
Do you see any of yourself in her? Do you see any traits in her that seem like you, or specifically unlike you?
Neither one, although somebody in the family has said that she takes after Mark and Mark takes after me, and he is stubborn as a mule. I don't think of myself as being that stubborn, but he certainly is, and she certainly is.
Do you think that they would think that you're stubborn?
Oh, yeah. They think that they got it from me.
Do you think that either of your parents were like that? Do you think you get that from them?
No, and I don't know how my mother avoided that, because she certainly did frequently get either her way or get us to do the things that she thought were the right way to do them. And I don't know how she got us to do that, because she did not get, not argumentative, but just determined and firm and refused to give in. She didn't get like that. But there were some things that we knew we were supposed to do.
Well, do you think that you have the most, which of these do you think you have the most of? Talent, intelligence, education, or persistence?
Persistence.
How do you think that's helped you in your life? And do you think that you are at a disadvantage compared to possibly having more of one of the other traits?
I think it has helped me get some things done that took a while to do, so I kept at it. And I think that even now, that's in my life in general, but even now, I tell somebody, if somebody says to me, why don't they do thus and such? And I said, who are they? And the people who are talking don't know who they are. So I said, well, what you have to do is find out who they are and then pursue that and get them to suggest to them that they do such and such. And that's what I do, and I consider that something that not very many people do, is I make a lot of phone calls to find out who they are. And that can be very hard. I have tried to find out who now owns the mineral rights to this property. I've persisted, and I have not found that out yet. I got through the first 4 owners after they sold it off, and I still don't know who is actually owns the mineral rights. I'd like to get them back, but I think that it may be impossible. I mean, if they want a lot of money, I don't know about that, but I haven't found out who owns them, so it's definitely not possible now, if I don't know who owns them, for me to get them. And why do I want them? I don't know. I just think it would be nice to have them.
Sure. When we were growing up, I know we listened a lot to Stan Freberg. Did sayings from the Stan Freberg recordings filter into our daily life? Do we have family sayings that we use from that? Do you remember what any of those might be?
Oh, yeah. From the United States of America. Sorry doesn't do any good, Charlie. If you make any kind of mistake and say you're sorry, sorry doesn't do any good, Charlie. It's too late. You've already poured the tea in the water. That's one. And take an Indian to lunch is another one. And the whole thing about playing the music at the time of the Revolutionary War and having the people rolled up in the parchment that there is the Declaration of Independence. Part of those, I don't remember them right this minute, but I would know them if you said them. So yes, they've and they have not only filtered to you and to me, they have filtered to Margaret. And I said, why did she get it? And Mark said, because we listen to that all the time. Pat doesn't like it very much. She doesn't think it's as funny. Margaret thinks it's hysterical, and she gets a lot of the references that we use.
Do you have a favorite movie, and why is it your favorite movie?
Wait a minute. Yes, I did have a couple favorites. I think that probably Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is one of my, I don't know if there's a single one, but it's one of my favorite ones, and that's because the 4 of us saw that together a bunch of times. or at least twice, and had a few of those sayings filter into our language.
Like, think you used enough dynamite there, books?
That's one. Never mind that. You can't swim, you'll probably drown. Yeah, but think you use enough that. And I don't think that we're alone. I think there are an awful lot of people who know what that is from. So that is definitely one of my favorite ones.
Do you have a favorite book? Oh, I didn't want to interrupt you. Were you going to
No,
say something else?
there are some other movies that I do like very much, but I think that at the moment that's going to take the top of the list. And a favorite book?
Mm-hmm.
No, it has to go by authors.
All right, who's your favorite author?
Probably Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, because of The Little Prince, which is a book that I find so touching and moving that I can't even read it anymore, because the last time I read it, I dissolved in tears. I'm presently reading another de Saint-Exupéry book. It's not as moving as The Little Prince is, but The Little Prince takes the cake for the top book. Then I also like everything by Wallace Stegner, but I especially like things by... See, I can't even remember their names. The Immense Journey, Lauren Isley. Lauren Isley also writes poetically and in ways that address me spiritually.
I have a question here that I think maybe it's kind of strange, but the question is, what's the most memorable phone call you've ever received? And after you answer, I may have one for you. So what do you have a memorable phone call that you can think of?
I think that one when they called and said my grandfather had died, that's kind of memorable.
I'm thinking of one that happened shortly after Dad died. I don't remember exactly how shortly. I guess it would have been about a year.
Was it a friend of his?
No.
Oh.
I was sitting in the dining room. Phone rang, you answered it, and I heard you say, I knew it. Do you remember that call?
Somebody else died.
No.
No?
No, that was Mark calling, saying that Pat was pregnant.
Oh. I've teased him about that because Mark frequently has said to me, guess what? And I said, the first time he wanted to marry Pat, and I didn't guess that they were going to get married. And so then they got married, and that's the one where he said they were going to get married on whatever the day was. June 20th, I think. And Dad, Mark said, so I want you to come. And Dad said, do we have to? Mark was very insulted. I thought it was very funny. But anyway.
That is funny.
And then they got married. Oh, no, they were going to buy a house. Guess what? We're going to buy a house. I didn't guess that. Then guess what? Pat's pregnant. And so I said, then he told me something, guess what, a while ago, and I don't remember what it was for, but I think I said, oh, Pat's pregnant. He said, no. I said, well, quit telling me guess what. That's tiresome, because I had used up all my guesses. But so I said, oh, yes, I can see that, because Dad had died, they bought a house, and that's how it goes. You get married, the dying doesn't necessarily factor in, but you get married and then you buy a house and then you have a kid. Lots of people do that.
Sure.
So I should have been able to guess that.
What's the one thing you've always wanted but still don't have?
Oh boy. I'm not sure that I can think of anything I've always wanted and don't have.
Do you feel differently about yourself now from how you felt when you were younger? Do you think you're a different person now, better or worse?
I would like to pretend I'm better, but I don't know that I am. I have no way of knowing. But I don't think I'm terribly different. I think that I hope that I have matured some, but I don't know exactly what that means. And I don't think I'm a terribly different person now, except that maybe I am a little more prone now to doing things the way I feel. I don't mean I don't take anybody else's ideas into account, but the way I feel it should be done, as opposed to doing it the way somebody else tells me it ought to be done. I don't think I do that as much as I did a long time ago. I was very much, because of this family business, family obligations, Grandma and Grandma Ann, yeah, I tried to do things the way, to cooperate with the way she wanted things done. However, Ann never nagged us about moving out here, which I know made her unhappy. She didn't really want us to move. She wanted us to stay closer to her. She never nagged us about that. She also, when we got married, she never nagged us about having children, which we have some relatives who have said to their children when they get married, "When are you going to give me a grandchild?" I think that stinks. That's a terrible thing to say to people. My mother never did that to us. Grandma Rohe didn't do that to us. And so we pretty much managed it on our own terms. But I know the thing that she didn't say, "I want you to come back and live here." She never laid that on me, and it turned out everything kind of worked out okay, but her life might have been a little more pleasant if we had, not just us, but our whole family. And one time she said what she would really like is if Puz and Coke and all of their progeny, that's a lot of people, and us, all lived in that house in Crete. And I said, we wouldn't all fit. And she said, "No, I guess not." But I don't know I think maybe it was wishful thinking. I don't think she ever would have really thought that was wonderful to have all 79 of us living there, but she missed having her family around her. And I missed, after we moved out here, I missed having that whole extended family for, I don't know, 10 or 20 years. Long time. I miss that. I don't so much anymore. And of course now I've got some. I've got Stephanie and Vanessa and their guys, and Margaret and George. So our extended family is here now.
Is there someone in history that you really admire, and why?
Well, I have for years have admired Thomas Jefferson because of something that it says on the Jefferson Monument Memorial, or the building. It says, "I pledge eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man," or something like that. And I've always admired that. But the more I read about Jefferson, the more I think he was a flawed person also. And so now, if anybody says, "Oh no, Jefferson was terrible," No, he wasn't terrible. He was just amazing. He did all kinds of good things. He did some not very good things. Part of what he was part of the slave enterprise. And part of it is that he absolutely could not manage money. I mean, he was dead broke when he died. And that's one of the reasons I think that's why he gave his library to Congress, because he was so broke. He owed them money. He probably didn't ever pay his taxes. So he had good and bad, but we all do, I think. I'm sure that there are some people who die in Evergreen who are eulogized as if they never did anything bad, but they probably did. And that's all right. In a eulogy, you don't have to say all the bad things people did, but they probably did a few not quite so nice things. And if they were mostly nice, that's good.
Before we move on to the present, do you have any closing thoughts about your kids?
They are both astounding in ways that startle me. I can't figure out how we managed to get such kind and generous and talented children. They're both something else, and they're definitely our best projects.
So moving on to the present, how is your day different now from your daily routines in the past?
My daily routine now is going to the doctor. And that started happening when I was about 75. Oh, no. Not that long ago. Let's say, but 70, let's say after 75. That's when the doctor thing started. And after I was 80, now it's just one doctor visit after another. So that's how my daily stuff is different from the way it used to be. I still go to exercise class, except now I haven't been for a while because I've had a bunch of problems that have kept me from going. And I don't go to community meetings because I don't drive at night at all, or as much as I used to, and I certainly don't drive far. I don't drive anywhere except in Evergreen. And I used to be a friendly visitor. I'm not a friendly visitor anymore because I have an arrangement with the nursing home that I can call my person on the telephone, which I do occasionally, except probably not terribly often.
Friendly visitor meaning visiting people who can't get out and
right.
Have any friends.
Right. And I like doing that because I know that I did something for them, but that did something for me too. It was a very positive experience for me. And now I just seems to me I'm ridiculously preoccupied with my physical being because I have so many things that are problems. Now, I know I'm better off than a lot of people my age, but I'm having trouble adjusting to being so infirm and having so many problems. I'm trying to adjust, she said quietly.
Well, what do you think the hardest thing is about growing older? And what do you think is the best thing, if there is a best thing?
I think the best thing is that there is a margin given. I don't like to say I can do whatever I want to do because that's not entirely true. But I certainly have more leeway to say no to things that I cannot do or that I feel I don't want to do. I can say, no, I can't manage that. So I have more leeway in my decisions. That's maybe That might be the best thing. And then you want to know the unbest thing.
Yes.
The limitations that I have on my physical self that keep me from doing things that I really want to do, but know that physically I cannot manage them anymore.
If you could be any age right now, what age would it be?
Assuming one would be that healthiness of that age, if one were that age?
Not having anything to do with health. Just having to do with which age you felt the most comfortable at or were healthiest, if that's...
Well, I remember being 43 and telling Dick that being 43 was the best year of my life. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because we were getting along well, doing what we wanted to do together. I don't remember for sure, but I think of 43 as being a pretty good year. But and 40 to 60 was probably pretty good. It's been downhill since 60.
Do you feel like you can tell a person how to prepare for old age? Is there anything you wish you'd done differently?
Right at this moment, I cannot think of something that I wish I had done differently. And the only thing I tell people to prepare for old age is don't get older. That's not a whole lot of help.
Is there something you look forward to now? It's kind of an open-ended question. It's hard to answer.
Well, no, there really isn't. And that's another bothersome thing. There isn't anything I look forward to. I know some people who are in my age group in general who have all kinds of trips planned. I admire that they are, one of them is legally blind and just had her knee replaced. And she's my age. No, she's 4 years younger than I am. But I admire that she has the interest to do that. She's planning a trip. And I admire that. There's no place I want to go. There's some places that would have been nice to go, but I don't want to go there badly enough to put up with the difficulty of getting there now. But there's nothing I especially want to do, so there's nothing I really look forward to.
What things are most important to you now?
Well, keeping in touch with my kids and with the people I have known, not so much in previous lives, but just the people I've known around Evergreen. I want to keep up with them while they're still alive and here. A lot of them are moving away, and it's harder to keep up with them. For one thing, if they move to an assisted living place, a lot of them do move into Denver, and nobody ever drives down there to see their friends in Denver. So you cut yourself off from a lot of things. But I've forgotten the question. Was I looking forward to something?
Yes.
No, I don't. I
That's
don't
fine.
think so.
What do you do for fun now, aside from going to the doctor?
And you say that tongue in cheek, except I have fun going to the doctor because I joke with all of them, and if they think I'm fun to have come in, and some of them do seem to enjoy me, that I like that. I certainly try to make it a positive, bubbly experience rather than, oh, good Lord, here I am again. But what do I enjoy doing? Well, actually, when I'm feeling really wonderful, I kind of like my exercise class. I'm not liking it since I had my leg operated on. That I've been worse off since I had that all done. And I do enjoy seeing Joanne and talking with Joanne. And talking with the people I know. I like doing that.
Do you find the present day world, either America or the entire world, do you find it to be better now or better when you were younger?
When I was younger, it was more manageable for me. I was not having more of an influence on it, but the part that I had to deal with, I think I understood better that part back then. I have no idea how to fix any of the stuff that's going on now. I think there's an awful lot that is not positive about the world. I do not dislike this country. I'm not one of the people who hates the government and thinks the government's doing everything wrong and all of that. No, the federal government does a lot of stuff that I appreciate, and I want them to keep on doing it. And so for that reason, I'm willing to pay my taxes because I feel positive about it. Yes, there's a lot of waste. There may even be some fraud. Well, there is a lot of fraud, but there is everywhere. Now, if we could get everybody to stop doing naughty things like that, we wouldn't have these problems, either in the private sector or the public sector. But I don't think we're going to fix that. And I certainly have no idea how to fix all the stuff that's going on in the Middle East. I can't go over there and talk to all the young men who are joining ISIS and saying, what is it that you want? I can't say that to them.
Well, there is a saying that goes, they've been fighting for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
It's got to be over soon.
I think that's funny.
What have you liked best about your life so far? What's your happiest or proudest moment or thought?
It's two different things. My happiest personal moment was a long time ago. I had 3 when I was singled out as being kind of special. That made me feel very good. But the happiest moment of my whole life is probably being married to somebody who was the smartest man and the most interesting man I had ever met, and having these 2 amazing children.
Do you feel like that's the most important success in your life then?
Yeah, I think I probably do.
What do you think would be your biggest frustration?
My biggest frustration is that I did not finish something, which my grandmother said was not good. If you're going to start something, you have to finish it. And I spent years trying to read Little Women, which I hated. I tried it 4 times, never finished it. I've decided now to give that up. I'm not going to try to read Little Women again. I hated it. But I did not finish getting my master's degree, and that's probably my big, disappointment? Frustration. That's my frustration, that I didn't stay with it. So the choice I made was to leave the job and leave Kansas, and I ended up marrying Dick and having these 2 nifty kids. So it was a good bargain, but I still feel frustrated that I didn't do it.
Well, if you could suddenly change that and have a master's degree, does it frustrate you because of your personal growth, the potential personal growth in not having it, or because you might have done something else with the degree?
No, the first thing. If it frustrates my personal growth, I would have liked to have completed a task that I started. Because I said an hour ago that one of my niftiest characteristics was my persistence. Well, I didn't persist to finish that. So that makes me annoyed with myself.
I think you can give yourself permission to stop being annoyed.
Well, what a lovely thing for you to say to me.
Well, if I'd known it was going to be that easy, I would have said it 30 years ago.
I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't have been all right to give myself permission 30 years ago.
Perhaps. What's the most difficult thing that ever happened to you, and how did you deal with it?
Well, that decision was pretty difficult, but I think I have gotten to, that's part of my maturing. I think I've gotten to the point where it's okay. I made the decision and it turned out swell. And so I think it's okay. But it was difficult for me to have Dick die because I didn't know. This sounds so stupid. I didn't know exactly what I was supposed to do or who I was supposed to be, because there was a time when I was not so much Tommy Patterson as I was Dale Patterson's wife. And there's a difference. And when he died, I had to make that transition. And I didn't know whether I knew how to do it. And if you want to know how I did it, I can't tell you because I don't know. But it took me a long time. So I tell people, it took me about 4 years to adjust to being me instead of Dale Patterson's wife.
Well, I think you've done a tremendous job at it, actually, because I can't think of anyone else who would be able to live 25 years completely on their own in the mountains and still be sitting here talking to me 25 years later. Certainly there are health problems, but everybody's going to have those. But how many people could live? I'm sure that people in a lot of cities would think that you're living in a log cabin with no running water or electricity. It's certainly not like that, but it shares some aspects of that because you have to be not just self-sufficient, but willing to be self-sufficient for insanely long periods of time.
That's a wonderful thing for you to say to me.
Oh, I'm not saying it to be wonderful. It's absolutely true. And I know that you sometimes compare yourself to your mother because your mother lived by herself until she was 93?
90.
90. And then moved immediately from her house to the hospital where she passed away 3 days later. So for some reason you think that there's a standard that she set that you're not meeting. But in fact, the opposite is true because she didn't live on her own her entire life. She had an entire family of people, boarders, family, friends, guests, constantly in her house, which you have never had the opportunity of having.
But she took care of all those people.
No, they took care of her. She thought she took care of them. But she didn't. She couldn't have survived in that house by herself. She couldn't have done what you've been doing for the last 25 years. So that's something you should know.
Thank you.
So moving on.
If I start having help now, can I still kind of muscle in on
Yes.
that comment?
Yes, because she had help that entire time. So yes, of course you can have help. Absolutely. So we just have a few more questions to go.
Okay.
What do you know now that you wish you'd known when you were young?
Oh my.
And none of these really require an answer.
No, but that's something to think about. What do I know now that I wish I had known? I'm not sure that I have an answer to that.
That's fine.
There may be one, but I haven't meditated about that.
Is there something that you've thrown away that you wish you had kept?
Yes, there is, but now I've forgotten what it is. I'll have to think about it a minute. There's one thing that I did get rid of. Oh, I know. When my mother died, we went through all these things, and we all got to pick what we wanted. And the marvelous thing about that was the extent to which my brothers and I argued was this, quote, well, I think I'd kind of like this dish. Unless you want it, if you want it, take it, that's okay. Yes, you take it, no, I don't need to have it. That's how much we argued. So we got everything taken care of. And since then, there was a set of china, woven china baskets that were very big 100 years ago. And I said I didn't want them because I didn't want them. They didn't go with anything I had, and I didn't want to have to take care of them. And some small hand-painted plates. And I didn't pick those either. I don't know whether any of the other girls did or not, or either of the other girls. But since then, I thought, oh, I wish I had taken those. I could have sold those at the Antique Roadshow because they were old. That's too bad I didn't take those. But I would have had to take care of them all this time. And I didn't want them, and I didn't want to have them, and I didn't really want the responsibility of them on. So the only thing I'm missing is that they were sort of interesting because of their history, but that's not something that I really wanted. Does that count?
Yeah, that counts.
Okay.
Has the way you look at life or people changed over the course of your life?
I think I am trying to be a little bit more generous in my assessment of other people because I know that I have flaws of which I'm not even aware. I mean, there's some things about me that must rub somebody the wrong way. I don't know about whether it does my kids or not, but there are things. So if other people rub me the wrong way, I shouldn't let it bug me because I probably drive them crazy. I think I would like to be a little more generous in my assessment of other people. There are one or two people that I think are basically mean-spirited, and I'm not going to be very generous with them. But there's no reason to take offense at how other people do. They're doing something. For instance, an awful lot of people ask me how old I am. I don't care anymore. I used to care, and I used to say, well, we didn't ask people that. I'm from the Midwest, like Johnny Carson. We didn't ask people things like that. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me now I'm not particularly proud of being 94. What's to be proud about?
Well, you're not 94.
84. Thank you. Because I haven't died yet? That should make me proud that I haven't died yet?
Did your parents or grandparents give you a piece of advice that you still remember?
My grandfather did not. My father's parents, I don't remember a word they said to me. But my grandmother, my mother's mother, gave me a book, and she had written some stuff in it. And then she had another book that one of my cousins gave her, and she, it was kind of a quotation book, sort of. Not an autograph book, but she had people write their favorite things in it. So, and I ended up with that because that cousin died. That's a very nice book. But one thing that my grandmother did tell me was, I'm not sure that I could even remember the whole thing, but I have learned patience from the impatient, tolerance from the bigoted, and kindness from the mean-spirited. And strangely, not strangely, I have no gratitude to my teachers. And I think that is a very profound thought. And I think about that. She also liked Whittier, a poem about dying, and she recited that to me, and I learned that at her behest, I guess. And so I think about, yeah, I think about my grandmother a lot. She was a pretty amazing woman. She lived to be 97. One reason I think she lived to be 97 is that my mother took care of her for 30 or 40 years. And
if your sons had stayed and lived here for the last 25 years, do you think you'd be a little better off? Please say no.
No, I don't think so. I don't think I would be. The only way that I'd be better, I mean, since good old Don Amici invented the telephone, that's great. But I think that the fact that my sons keep in touch with me by telephone or by seeing me, and they do talk to me. See, that's something. There's some people whose children don't talk to them, which I don't quite understand. If they had lived closer, that wouldn't have kept my knee from going bad, and it wouldn't have. It would not have affected any of my physical disabilities. I can't imagine that they would have. So no, I don't think I'd be better off.
If a young person came to you asking what's the most important thing for living a good life, what would you say?
Oh my goodness. Well, the instant answer to that has to be a positive attitude. But there are lots of things for living, a good life?
Yeah.
There are a lot of things to think about to live a good life. So you want to start with a positive attitude and let it go at that, because I don't want to sit here and list all of the things for living a good life.
What do you see as your place or purpose in life, and how did you come to that conclusion?
Oh, my purpose in life. I came to that conclusion about 70 years ago, that I would like to live my life so that every day I made somebody else's life a little brighter, not necessarily even better, just a little brighter or something, a laugh here, or maybe help them in some way, but maybe not. And I have to do that every day, make somebody's life a little brighter. That has been my goal for this whole time.
Is that what you'd like your children and grandchildren to remember about you, or is there something else?
Well, if I did that, that wouldn't be too bad to be remembered for that, would it?
No.
So I would like to have them have happy remembrances, positive remembrances.
I just have one more question. Is there another influential experience or person in your life? Is there any other subject that we have not covered that you want to make sure that we do?
Right at the moment, I have the feeling that you have done a remarkable job of covering all the things that I would have thought to cover. Because the only thing that seems to me very personal, fairly private, that I don't talk about to everybody, you did cover, and that's the business about getting my spiritual renewal by looking out the window at the mountain. And I think you've done a very comprehensive job.
Well, then I'll go ahead and sign off, but I just want to say in closing that there must be some sort of cosmic alignment of forces that allowed us to do this, because we've been doing it for 2.5 hours and the phone has not rung one single time.
I noticed that.
Which I cannot understand. Knowing as I do, how critical the phone is to your communication with the people that you care about and the people that you know, which I guess are kind of one and the same, mostly. It's beyond my imagination that the phone hasn't rung this entire time.
I think it's because it's a Saturday night and most normal people go out on Saturday night and do something.
I don't know. I'm not sure they do anymore. But
either
way.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for devoting this time, and especially after having been in the ER today. We carted you right out of the ER and back up to here and made you answer all these questions. And I appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you for asking, because, of course, it has to be a lot of fun to talk about oneself.
Sure, I hope so.
And so thank you for the opportunity. And also, thank you for the opportunity to share this with you, because I don't know whether we have talked about all this stuff or not.
No, there's a lot of new